Good morning, Blues, for Monday, the 3rd of March, 2025. Incredible, we're already into March, so I guess technically now we're in the running part of this season. It's been a quiet few days on the Chelsea front, which has actually been good. I haven't made a show for some time, especially in the world of Chelsea. You're kind of used to making shows every day or every other day. I wanted to take some time out to kind of reassess, think about things, see how things played out, and just kind of chill a bit because, listen, we've covered a lot about Chelsea, and I'm a big believer on this show of quality over quantity. And there is kind of a fear of recording a show and saying the same thing over and over again, because that has kind of been the way of things at Chelsea for a long time now. So I hope you had a good weekend, maybe chilled. If you watched the football, did you enjoy it? I mean, Man United going out of the FA Cup and Willian scoring a penalty was quite funny. I have to say, currently, I'm a big wrestling fan, and it's insane to me we live in a world with a John Cena heel turn. Still, it is the biggest thing that happened over the weekend, undeniably. Even people I didn't know in the Chelsea community who were wrestling fans who were tweeting about it, I think tells you how seismic this was. The question of the day is, if that was to be replicated in Chelsea, kind of the Chelsea universe, who would turn heel that would be a massive shock? Or has there been Chelsea heel turns? Let me know down in the comments below. But that is one of the most seismic events and shocking events I've ever seen. So kind of on my mind at the moment, that John Cena facial expression. I know it's going to be a meme, and I'm sure I'll probably end up using it in a Chelsea-related manner in the future. We've got a few things to get through today. I want to speak about Estevao because once again, especially yesterday, but in recent days and in recent months, Estevao is a name that you constantly hear brought up on Chelsea social media in a very positive light, and I'm not saying that's a bad thing necessarily, but especially the hype around Estevao Willian is quite crazy. I mean, yesterday I saw on people I know and people I respect use the phrase Ballon d'Or to describe what could happen with Estevao at Chelsea. And I'm always someone that has, with Estevao, given how young he is, and me and Joe Tweed spoke about this on the podcast a few weeks ago, I think it is fair to kind of just tone down expectations, and that's not about trying to drag down the player. I think that's just about being realistic, because I do have a fear of what might happen if those lofty expectations are not met very quickly in our current give me everything now world. So we'll speak about that. I want to speak about Djorde Petrovic. We're going to speak about Conor Gallagher. Todd Boehly obviously gave a lot of quotes last week. I'll give you my thoughts on that. And then Matt Law also gave a quote that I know gave a lot of people thought and sort of reaction. And there's more to it than that. And I think, unfortunately, just kind of being honest, maybe a bit on journalism and kind of the way football journalism works in a way. And I'm not a conspiracy theorist. We're not going to do any of this. Everyone who disagrees with me is paid off, because I've constantly rallied against that. I've been accused of that in the past. I think it's stupid. I think it's mindless. But I do think, hearing a journalist, basically talk down some Chelsea fans on a protest, do I agree with it? Do I not? I'll give you my thoughts on that. So please like, subscribe. We're going to have content regular coming up as we head towards the weekend against Leicester and basically the rest of the season. I know obviously we've got an international break at the end of this month, which is a bit frustrating, but it kind of does feel like this is in some ways been an international break. So lots to come up, and to see how Chelsea end the season with the Conference League returning, and of course the Premier League, and whether Chelsea can make that top four. So let's start off with Djorde Petrovic. He has now 4 clean sheets in a row for Strasbourg. And I think it's relevant to speak about Djorde Petrovic, not only because of that form and everyone kind of realising how good of a keeper he's been, but also because subtly, if you've been tracking the latest briefs, I know many of them come out in a rapid period of time, so I'd have some sympathy for you if you miss one. They're like London buses, or London tube trains. If you miss one, there'll be one coming along in 2 minutes' time about the sporting directors. Djorde Petrovic is now actually, if you notice, back in the list of keepers referenced for the summer, which I think is notable. I don't think there's going to be an admission of a clear and obvious error regarding why in God's name did we ever let Djorde Petrovic leave in the summer when he was clearly our most competent and strongest goalkeeper from last season. And I have to say, am I at all surprised? No, I could have predicted this in June that Djorde Petrovic was going to be having a good season at Strasbourg and we'd have goalkeeping problems. I mean, listen, you do not need to be Doctor Strange looking at all the eventualities in an Infinity War of what could eventually happen. Like, it was so clear what was going to happen. It has happened. And I don't really buy that Djorde Petrovic has transformed as a keeper. No, he was just the most competent, and we let our most competent goalkeeper leave, and this is what you get instead. So we'll see if Petrovic returns. I'm still not entirely sure, and I'm not wholly against the argument that Chelsea should still be going out there and buying a serious goalkeeper. But based on what we see from Chelsea and based on how they act in the transfer window, they've got Mike Penders. They're very high on Mike Penders. I can't say whether Mike Penders is going to be amazing or not because he's still a very young player. That's another thing we could speak about. It relates, of course, to Estevao and a lot of things at Chelsea at the moment. It's in theory, there's one thing, but in reality and what a player actually encounters when they become a first-team player, of course, are very different. So Djordje Petrovic, I mean, if I was to say to you right now, we start next season with Djordje Petrovic as our first choice, would you be okay with that? I don't think many people would be over the moon about it. I think instinctively most people would think we need to go and sign a big keeper. But if that doesn't happen, and instead of Robert Sanchez being first choice or Philip Jorgensen being first choice, we actually just return back to Djordje Petrovic, is that the worst thing in the world? I don't think it's an amazing situation, but it kind of, for me, just feels like a pointless waste of a year for Djordje Petrovic when he could have been having that development at Chelsea, and I think we would be in a better position in our goalkeeping area, but that is what it is. Conor Gallagher too, of course, was making headlines over the weekend. This clip went quite kind of viral of him making a couple of tackles at the end of Atletico's game, and Diego Simeone particularly on the touchline going absolutely insane. Conor bigging up the crowd at the Wanda Metropolitano. Gallagher has become the player I think many of us anticipated he would under Diego Simeone. Again, talk about things that are kind of easy to anticipate in the world of football. You look at Gallagher's skill set, you look at what he does, especially his work rate, and you tie that with Diego Simeone, the attributes Diego Simeone likes to have in his football team, and it was clearly going to be a match made in heaven. And I can't feel that Chelsea lack someone like Conor Gallagher at the moment. The work rate, the desire, kind of that consistency, that ability to cover ground. Chelsea, we've been talking a lot about our midfield depth, but also just our midfield ability to cover space and to protect and to work hard. I mean, these are intangible things that never leave the game, and I think a lot of people were talking about, it's interesting watching and hearing the post-match analysis about Marc Cucurella after Southampton, and also the post-match analysis of Cucurella and Caicedo. The way people praise Cucurella, it makes me laugh, kind of, not to talk down Cucurella, but, you know, the things that people praise Cucurella for, they would dismiss about Conor Gallagher. And they are kind of intangible things, you know, winning your 50-50s, covering ground, protecting others, alert to danger. Basic football things that are always going to be relevant in the top game. And as someone pointed out very astutely, why do Strasbourg have a better defensive record than us? Well, if you look, they have the competent goalkeeper in Djorde Petrovic, and they have a midfielder who can cover ground and go box to box and be a very physical presence in Liga. And of course, that's Andre Santos. Whilst Chelsea don't have either of those things currently, Moises Caicedo can't do everything on his own. So basics in football, and of course, people also rightly pointed out, you look at that deal in the summer, João Felix on loan at Milan. He's now getting benched. João Felix is turning into João Felix again. Who could have guessed that João Felix would not turn out to be a revelation? How many more moves do we need to see of João Felix before people realise that he isn't that good of a footballer? He isn't that amazing of a footballer? And again, if Andre Santos comes back, I think there is a real hype around him, and I actually think more justified than even Estevao, because at least with Andre Santos, you can see senior level European football. I think French to English is a more apt comparison in terms of this is a guy who moved from South America, who did have that adaptation period, who did have a setback at Nottingham Forest, but has found himself at Strasbourg. And I'm excited to see what he could do at Chelsea if we don't sell him. So let's talk about Estevao, right? I think all of this is kind of linking into Estevao. He scored again at the weekend. He's doing amazing things at the moment, and people were talking about his record as a young player in Brazil is remarkable. Peter Pankowski, who is someone who I remember getting onto one of my articles when I was working at Football London, and I think he's really insightful, really good analyst. I definitely suggest you go and follow. Guest of the channel recently, guest of the show recently, Joe Tweeds brought me onto this feed. He shared it on X. And he was talking about Estevao. And he is someone that knows a lot, Peter Pankowski, about Brazilian football. So it's not just someone like me talking, kind of, I guess, averagely or kind of just from a distance, casual view. I mean, I'm not someone that watches every single Brazilian football game. I'm not a Brazilian football expert like someone like Jessica Frotto, who we've had on the show before, who talks glowingly about the talent of Estevao and Andre Santos as well. And, you've got to take that into consideration. This is someone who watches Brazilian football, knows a lot about Brazilian football, so you have to take their opinion seriously. And he says on his thread here, and I think there's a lot to take, and I think people should take this seriously. And it's not, again, there's an immature way to react to stuff like this of you're talking rubbish, you're talking down Estevao, you want him to fail. No, it's just realism and how 99.9% of young players, especially those players moving from a foreign league, especially not just France to England, Portugal to England, Italy to England, it's moving literally continents and a whole different culture, a whole different climate, and how they're going to deal with that. So he said, I do feel people need to tone down their expectations, as in, I think he's shown a level of maturity and determination well beyond his years, and we could easily be staring a Neymar-level talent here. But at the same time, people have built a false image of him in a sense. This is him dismantling sides like São Bernardo and Vitória, who are well below what Palmeiras' level is. It's no surprise. I'm not trying to downplay him, far from it. Estevao has been Palmeiras' best player last year by a country mile, but the amount of highlights people gasp over are loads, but context needed to be applied. Thrusting him into this supposed saviour when he might need an adaptation period is crucial, especially with a fan base as patient as Chelsea. But I just know 60 million spent for what may come up, and it will annoy me because it's from the same people that shared a clip of him speeding by Ronaldo or Filipinho and treating him as if he's already Messinho. Patience, please. I echo a lot of that, because another thing I want to point out is, you look at comparisons to wonder kids that have arrived at Chelsea. The biggest and most obvious one, the most successful one in recent years, maybe my life, is Eden Hazard, right? In terms of someone who was projected to be a big player, arrived at Chelsea and became that big player. Not someone that was hyped and maybe left early like Kevin De Bruyne and Mohamed Salah and turned good elsewhere. It just didn't turn out to be that player. We've had many of those in Chelsea history. The thing that Hazard had when he walked into Chelsea was not only European experience, but also an environment and a dressing room that's very different to the Chelsea of today. It was a Roman Abramovich Chelsea. It was a dressing room that contained a lot of players who had just won the Champions League with Chelsea for the very first time. It contained an older, wiser Frank Lampard. It still contained JT. It still contained Ashley Cole, Petr Cech. All right, Drogba had just left, but it still contained a bulk of players, John Obi Mikel, who had worked in an elite environment under Jose Mourinho, who of course returned them, who became an elite coach again and won Chelsea another Premier League title. And of course, I think, Jose's impact on Eden's career was massive, of developing him as a footballer and working in the Premier League and succeeding in the Premier League. Culture and environment is massive for players. It really is, because it's not just a simple case of some players are maybe just so good a bad environment they can overcome. I'm not denying there's a possibility of that, but I also think, especially for very young players, of understanding what it takes to succeed at a club, to what it takes to succeed in a certain league and country, you need those good characters and good mentality around you. And it's something we've consistently talked about at Chelsea, is the lack of that, or the fear that there is a real dearth of that across the club. Like, I'm not just talking about the dressing room, I'm talking about above, I'm talking about coaching, I'm talking about the hierarchy. It's something we've spoken about consistently. Estevao walks into an environment which many of us fear is an environment that doesn't have a lot of pressure, doesn't have a lot of accountability, and maybe doesn't have an elite coach driving you on, or elite players consistently in the dressing room pressuring you to get better, especially because there is a lack of seniority. Who's the wiser, older head in that dressing room who has been there, seen it, done it, who has won at the top level, who's going to give advice to Estevao Willian and make him better? It's a shame it just hasn't worked out that Thiago Silva, timeline-wise, was not at Chelsea. I think obviously Thiago would have really taken him under his wing probably and been that player for him. Who is that in the current Chelsea dressing room? I don't know who is that. If Estevao walks into the Liverpool dressing room, he's got Virgil van Dijk, he's got Mohamed Salah, he's got players that have been there, seen it, done it. Alisson, of course, and a Brazilian player who we could look up to and gain wisdom from. I don't see that in the current dressing room. So unless Estevao is freakishly good that he can, even Cole Palmer, we talk about as an elite player, but Cole Palmer's going through a difficult period at the moment. Cole Palmer is still ridiculously young. Cole Palmer is not a veteran who's been there, seen it, done it. He's done a lot at Chelsea so far, but he hasn't won a trophy yet. He hasn't propelled us to elite Premier League victories or Champions League victories. So it's not that Estevao can never work out. It's just I think people need to rein back he's the saviour figure. And as Joe Tweeds brilliantly put it, if we're relying everything on an 18, 19-year-old to come in and save Chelsea Football Club from Brazil, I think it shows how bad the club is currently in terms of structuring itself in a way that can deal with the highest and biggest pressure. So that's really what I want to stress about Estevao Willian. It's not that his talent is all fake. It's all overhyped. That's not the point at all. You look at players like Vinicius Jr. Right, Vinicius Jr. even in an elite environment like Real Madrid took several years to become the player he is now. Even if you walk into an elite environment, it maybe takes you a while to even get to that. So I just think people should temper their expectations, and I think it's so important, and it goes back to recruitment, right? Why you have a balanced level of recruitment, that you do have older players in the squad, that you do have mature players in the squad, that you do have players, especially if you are a club that wants to thrive to become one of the best, to have players who do have a level of winning experience that can maybe bring those young players along with you. Because, Estevao is going to walk into a different climate. What happens when, I know Burnley aren't in the Premier League currently, when he gets tackled and, physically targeted in a way that he hasn't in Brazil? What happens then? And I'm not saying Estevao's going to crack under the pressure. It's just, Eden Hazard had to deal with that. There is a level of physicality in the Premier League that you don't get elsewhere. There is a level of pressure he's going to get at Chelsea that he hasn't got elsewhere. That's not to talk down Palmeiras, but I just think in terms of worldwide expectation and scrutiny on the Premier League, that is undeniable. And I think it's why it's more, again, it's less about the player. I've consistently stressed this. It's less about the player and their own individual talent. It's more about the culture above them and the system that's there to try and support their development. Because if the system is right and Estevao is everything people say he is, we've got an incredible talent on our hand that could propel us and help us get to success quicker, which of course is a great thing. Let me know your thoughts on that. Final two things. Todd Boehly gave another press conference. He was at the Football Business Summit. I think it was the Financial Times, wasn't it, last week? I saw a lot of reaction to these quotes, and this is not me trying to defend Boehly, even though I like him more than Iqbali, but, it's just, I found the outrage about some of these quotes kind of a little bit strange, purely because he didn't say anything for me that struck out as anything wildly different to what I've heard Boehly say in public before, or kind of things we didn't already know. And I kind of think it's unrealistic that Boehly was going to walk out into a public setting, a professional setting like that. It's not, talk about wrestling at the start, this is not Todd Boehly. I mean, I would have loved it if he went out there and cut a CM Punk pipe bomb, a bit like CM Poch at the end of last season. I really loved, I'd love to see that, right? But we're not getting that in the world of football. It's unrealistic we're ever going to get that from a head coach. It's even more unrealistic you get that from a business, a billionaire in this kind of setting. He's going to play it safe. Any kind of dispute or disharmony behind the scenes is not going to come out in public whilst he's clearly connected to Chelsea. It's just not going to happen. So I kind of think that the outrage, again, like I'm someone who has reacted negatively and criticised the club because I think you need to, but I kind of found it just like, well, what's so different about what he said here? I don't think that these conferences, unfortunately, the longer they've gone on and the more Boehly has spoken, mean much, because they kind of come across as, white noise. They kind of come across as just the same as everything we hear. I consistently say this, it's something that's just true in life. You judge people on their actions, not their words. And, Boehly and this club speak a lot, but you got to judge them more in their actions. If their actions say something, I think it's more relevant and powerful and just more accurate to judge them on their actions rather than what they say in public or what they brief to preferred journalists. So Matt Law also said something. He was on London is Blue Pod and he was asked about the protest. Now, I want to give Matt Law a fair hearing here, because I think that people who hadn't, for years I've sat here and I think people online have some people online just don't get how reporting or journalism works, and I think have an immature kind of reaction to it. If a reporter breaks a news story that you don't personally like and then attack the journalist for it, it's like, well, they're just reporting the news. Like, that's not their opinion. That's just the news, right? And that's their job to do it. And Matt Law has obviously been in that position for a long period of time at Chelsea and has been regarded as one of the most reputable and respected reporters covering the club for a very long period of time. So his reputation can't really be questioned on that. He did give his opinion that, and let's quote him specifically here, he said on the London's Blue Pod, "There's a group of fans within the protest who I feel are more results focused. A few months ago they were singing, 'We've got our Chelsea back.' Now they sing, 'We want our Chelsea back.' To those people, my message would be, grow up." Now, I had criticism of the protest. I felt that it was a little bit confused, particularly the only visual image of someone running Chelsea in that protest was Todd Boehly and people throwing dollar signs and dollars at that banner. I don't think it was a great look, because I think it misses the point of who's actually running things at Chelsea currently, and it isn't Todd Boehly, it's Benedict Barley, Paul Winstanley, Lawrence Stewart. That is the power trio at Chelsea currently making the key decisions that I think is making most people unhappy. You have to add nuance in there. That's not that Todd Boehly holds no accountability, that Vivid Seats is not something you should be annoyed about. It absolutely is something you should be annoyed about and be concerned about, absolutely. Or the fact that Todd Boehly was involved in a takeover, still speaks publicly in support of this project. Of course, you can't disregard that. That is relevant. He doesn't have to speak at these summits and still support the Clear Lake project, of course. But I felt that was frustrating. There were people probably on that protest who just, for them it is results focused, and for them it is results are the end game of everything. Now, does that mean that all opposition to Clear Lake and all opposition to what's going on at Chelsea irrelevant? Does that mean that everyone on that protest, and I don't even think Matt Law was saying that. I've heard Matt Law on that podcast also say he supports people's right to protest. So he's not sitting here as a journalist and kind of turning his nose up and saying you shouldn't be protesting. Of course, people are linking the fact that, in many ways, Matt Law has even wrote opinion articles in defence of the sporting directors, has, whether you call them briefings or reports about inside information about Chelsea that have been kind of given the sporting director's point of view. I do think my concern, and this is not just a Matt Law thing, I think it's a general thing, that I think that there is an issue in the sense that the way football media is currently, not only do journalists, they're under major scrutiny and pressure, I think, from, to get these stories. It's all about fast news. It's all about getting the big scoop. David Ornstein has become one of these, most reputable journalists because he is someone who has an incredible contacts list, probably the best in football journalism, and he's able to get these scoops consistently. That's what makes him one of the most highly regarded and known reporters in football. But there is also an access element to this of, like, if you want to be one of the best journalists, if you want to be one of the most respected and kind of well known, or someone that gets the information right 9 times out of 10 and is gonna get those prominent roles, that you have to cultivate relationships. That's just journalism. That's just what it is. I personally think that journalism should be much more combative than it is in the world of football. I personally do, but that's the way it is. I don't think, I don't agree that fans that fans were wrong to protest. I just don't, because I think Chelsea in many ways hold accountability for it getting to this place at the same time, for not communicating properly. You can call those people idiots if you want. You can call those people hypocrites for going out on that protest, and maybe some of them were singing "We've got our Chelsea back" 3 months ago. But those same people criticising those people for singing "We got our Chelsea back" would be having a go at those people for not supporting the team and not being positive. So you can't have it both ways. I hear a lot from people who are more supportive of the ownership and sporting directors how negative and toxic Chelsea fans are, how they always want to talk down the club, how they don't want to support the team. And then when they do support the team, then they get blamed for being positive in the first place. I just find that a bit weird. It's like, what do you want? Do you want fans to be honest 100% of the time? And does that mean sometimes they're not going to celebrate aggressively when they win? Or do you want them to be really positive all the time? I find that just a little bit hypocritical, to be honest. I think I'm pretty honest. I think I'm pretty consistent. I have consistent principles that I talk about on a wide array of shows for a long period of time. And if I do change my opinion on something, I'll tell you that I've changed my opinion on something. But when Chelsea are winning games, when things are good, I'm going to be positive. Even in that run, I remember being on a show with Liam Toomey and talking about still my issues with the recruitment. I didn't agree with certain elements of the recruitment, and I remember people being angry that I wasn't happy with certain elements of the recruitment whilst we were winning games. So I've been consistent on certain things, but of course when Chelsea win a game of football, I'm going to be happy because I'm a Chelsea supporter. I just find it weird that then you're taking that positivity and turning it against people later down the line. I'm not saying that singing "We've Got a Chelsea Back" and claiming that everything's rosy and then like 2 months down the line changing all of your opinions without stating that you have changed all your opinions. Yeah, it is a little bit weird, I have to say. If you were someone that was not critical of Clearlake before like January 2025, and you were so happy with what happened during the summer, and there's kind of, if you flip all of your opinions 100%, yeah, I have to say I do find that a little bit strange. But I think a lot of us have been pretty consistent, like in terms of our disdain at times, our contempt in strong ways, and also just criticism of things that have gone on. I think my show, more than most actually, and that's not trying to be big-headed, that's just like track record. Look at what I was saying during the summer. I'm saying similar here. And when Chelsea were doing well, I was happy to see them doing well, and I was happy that maybe all of my concerns in the summer were wrong. And that's the thing. It's like if Chelsea are doing well, if all my concerns are proven wrong and Chelsea win all of the trophies and Chelsea are doing amazingly, why do I care that my opinion's proven wrong? Why should I care? I'm happy Chelsea are winning. The reason I sit here with these concerns is because I think they're backed up by evidence. I think they're backed up by a track record and history. They're not backed up by just fantasy and just, willingness for that to happen. It's just, I'm giving you my honest opinion, and I think a lot of people share those opinions. So there we go for today's Morning Blues. Quite a long one today, but I haven't done a show for a while, so we had to cover several things. We'll be back probably to cover other news that comes out. We'll start to look ahead to not only the Leicester game, but the upcoming games. I may do a Q&A. Let's do a Q&A. So questions down below. I'll shout out for some questions online as well on X and also on Instagram, so you can drop them there. Please have a great Monday. Hope you're doing really, really well. If you haven't seen the John Cena heel turn, go and watch the John Cena heel turn, because professional wrestling... Listen, the great thing about pro wrestling is when football's crap, you can turn to pro wrestling and it'll be there for you. So those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below, and I'll see you again very soon. All the best.